Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending on where you are on this fast forward planet, wrapped in many layers of turbulence, climate change, ocean change, war, misinformation, pandemic, infodemic. Lots going on. And I always am looking for examples of where information, including visual information, can make a difference. And I had vaguely known about the Ocean Agency years ago. That's right. When I was doing a book about weather and climate history, I was looking for images of before and after images of coral reefs dealing with what's been going on with bleaching because of heat. So I knew a little bit, but I didn't really understand it till I was this late January, early February. My wife and I were on a Lindblad cruise speaking. I was speaking, and we were in Vanuatu briefly, one of the many stops, and zoom in here just to get the idea where that is if you haven't been there. And we were near this town, and we got driven to this place called Million Dollar Point. And I was immediately fixated on the shore. The shore was this insane. Let me get to the right images. So here we are. Welcome, Long Million Point. Oh, and it's not showing. Why is it not showing? Okay. Let's go. Oh, that's so funny. Okay. Anyway, we heard a little bit about the history. At the end of World War II, the United States had all this material, is the word, for jeeps and ammo and Coca-Cola bottles and everything you can imagine, and for complicated reasons, dumped it into the sea rather than give it to the British or the French. And the reasons are complicated, but not worth going into. But it created this astonishing scene there all along that shoreline. And this is what was there at the end of the war, unbelievable amounts of stuff. So I was taking pictures and taking video, and I thought, wow, what is it like down below? And some of the divers on the trip did go offshore. And later when we got back, I went on to Google Earth, and I poked around, and there were images there, and they were labeled from this thing called the Ocean Agency. And just to give you an idea, here we'll just zoom in, Million Dollar Point. You can do this, yourself on Google Maps or Google Earth, and if you dip your head underwater, here's it's not like being there, but it's pretty freaking amazing. And many of these images this is photosphere, and this is where I'm going to start to bring in my guest, Richard Vevers, who was the founder of Ocean Agency and still helps run it, and we're going to learn more about it. But so no matter where you are on the planet, you can kind of dive into the sea and get beyond the coastline limitations and try to understand the past and future of planet Earth. So that leads me to Richard, and to this. It's the oceanagency.org is the sort of the homepage. And I knew about you also from Chasing Coral, the film that followed up on Chasing Ice, a project that I had covered before. So tell us a little bit about your journey. You started in advertising, and how did the oceans and changing them for the better using photography and the like become your mission?
Yes, well, it's great to be on the webcast. But my background is advertising. So 10 years in London, working at some of the top advertising agencies until I had a very bad meeting one day, and I think we were talking about toilet tissue at the time. After sort of working about 8 hours straight, and decided this career was not for me anymore. So I decided to become an underwater photographer, really on the spot, and really did the full sea change, quite literally.
Had you had before you go on? Had you had some childhood or youth experience snorkeling and the like? Had you already dipped your head under?
Yes, I'd started sort of scuba diving as soon as I was allowed, so at 16. But that was really in swimming pools and quarries in England, so it wasn't very exciting scuba diving. But I was also interested in photography, and really it was only at that stage when I came to the end of my career in advertising that I decided to bring the two together. And I booked a trip off on the Great Barrier Reef to become an underwater photographer. The first dive didn't go too well. I got head butted by a giant Queensland groper that was about the size of a VW. So it was not the ideal start, but I just loved underwater photography and what you could do with imagery underwater.
And so how does that translate into creating an organization? It's you obviously you were taking pictures and stuff, but then what was the drive or what was the motivation to get beyond that? And by the way, while you were saying that, I'm showing, this is some video of you from chasing coral. So how did you take that plunge towards creating something bigger than just yourself with a camera?
Well, I think the plunge was partly financial. I soon sort of realized as an underwater photographer, you were up against a lot of independently wealthy underwater photographers, and it's very difficult to make a living. So I actually started working with conservation organizations to support their work in addition to the underwater photography. And that's really when I realized that a lot of these organizations were really suffering because of communication and lack of marketing sort of skills in communicating the work that they were doing. So I decided to set up a not-for-profit with the idea of becoming kind of the advertising agency for the ocean and bringing those ocean sort of the marketing skills to support ocean science and conservation. And so I set that up in 2010. And, our first project, we thought, well, wouldn't it be good to reveal the oceans and sort of leverage the technology that Google was working on to reveal terrestrial environments and do that underwater? So, we invented a camera to do that, our underwater street view camera that you can see there. Went to Google and said we could do this for them. And we formed a partnership to be able to, take Google Street View underwater. And it was a great adventure for the first few years.
And is this all? So this is roughly when, this particular juncture?
This was 2012.
Yeah, that's right around when Sylvia Earle had told me about how she convinced Google she and ultimately others, to add the oceans in 3 dimensions to Google Earth, which was really, it ended at the shoreline, and then the idea was to populate it with content. So it seems like similar timeline. That's kind of cool.
Absolutely, and it was as if sort of VR was made for oceans. We're so used to living on the plane where we're looking at the horizon all the time and not really looking that much down or that much up, whereas oceans is all about the 3 dimensions. And when you show kids imagery of the ocean on their doorstep, whether it's kids in sort of schools in America or kids in really remote communities, they just, I think, are blown away by the experience of being able to look around them and see all the life that is there just beyond their doorstep.
That's well, so how quickly did this start to kind of build into, you start with one image, one reef.
Yes.
How did that work? How is it working now too?
Well, it started off it was far more successful than we ever imagined. We had the initial imagery, which was then promoted by Google on the homepage. And I think more people went virtual diving on that single shot than have ever been diving in history in the oceans. So it shows you the power of that kind of collaboration. But then we sort of went from kind of the Great Barrier Reef to locations all around the world. So Galapagos and Sydney Harbour even. So lots of different locations. And it was really at that point that it then went to sort of a new level, because I got chatting to a scientist, Professor Ovo Gilberg, from the University of Queensland, who's a very famous coral reef scientist specializing in climate change. And he explained to me there wasn't a global baseline record of coral reefs. And this technology that we'd invented for the Google project could really transform being able to survey reefs at scale. So we decided to then turn it into a not just about revealing underwater environments, but turn it into a global scientific survey, which we brought on a sponsor, Catlin Insurance, to then pay for this science done at scale, taking over 1 million images in 28 different countries.
That's so amazing. And one of the critical ways to understand change, whether it's on the ocean or the land, is to have sort of long-term temporal tracking of conditions, right? That's what chasing ice was about, and
yes,
chasing coral. So that's fantastic to hear how that.
Yeah, we did surveys in places like Hawaii, where you've got the survey of the reefs back in 2013, and then they were hit by 2 back-to-back bleaching events. So we were able to go photograph them during the bleaching events, after the bleaching events, and really have that record of the impacts of climate change on reefs at scale, and then be able to develop the technology to do the image recognition so that we could analyze that imagery and make it publicly available very, very rapidly.
Wow. That's fantastic. And here's more from the website. Again, it's this is globalreefrecord.org, which I guess is the
so that was where we sort of made the imagery available. So if you go to that, you can then see this imagery.
Yeah, I will, right here. Yeah, so this is globalreefrecord.org. And again, you can kind of see this project, how it's working, the technology, and how it's creating a record over time, which is a key to understanding and then responding to change. And you have a series of other projects underway too. How big is the Ocean Agency now? Actually, before you get to that, one of the other things I think it's invaluable for people to know is it's not Creative Commons, but it's basically free to utilize with credit and the like. Is that right? Most of the
Yes, yeah. So what we've done is we've taken, we have our scientific record, which is the Global Reef Record, but we've also got a library of imagery called the Ocean Image Bank. Right. And that's where we take select images and make them freely available, because there's quite simply a lack of imagery, ocean science imagery, that allows people to tell the stories about what's going on in the ocean really effectively. And so we saw that as an opportunity of leveraging kind of all the interest in telling ocean science stories by providing the imagery, so people could do that themselves, whether it's educators, journalists, or scientists wanting to communicate about what's happening in the ocean.
That's just amazing. I'm just typing in a random. Here's Florida. You can search for images in that state and around those waters.
Unfortunately, you won't see too many healthy coral reefs there.
No, I know. Well, the last couple of years, the heat has been astounding. And, given CO2 levels, as you know too well, it's not going to get cooler anytime soon, at least not on a long-term basis. Again, so this is a great resource, the image bank. Describe some of the other aspects of the other initiatives. We're in the ocean decade still, is that right?
Yes. So we've been sort of a long-term partner with UNESCO, trying to promote the UN Ocean Decade for ocean science. And what we've been very keen to do is just raise awareness of the importance of the ocean and ocean science. And certainly that's sort of one thing that we're really focused on moving forward. So we've recently teamed up with the world's leading independent ocean science institution, Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, looking to sort of bring in these marketing skills to really support ocean science and change beliefs about the ocean and its importance. I think we often forget that we have this terrestrial view of the ocean, so we really can't, it's almost impossible to understand its influence on our lives and its importance. And so it's one of those subjects that largely gets overlooked or quickly forgotten. So what we're doing is seeing if we can reintroduce people to the ocean in a way that is sort of unforgettable.
Well, I do notice here too, there's educational resources. If you go into the, I just was there a minute ago and I've lost my way because it's also intriguing. Oh yeah, here.
Yes.
Creative communication toolkits, ocean phenomena, teaching resources. And
Yes, and this is I love ocean phenomena sort of learning, where you use images and go on a sort of a learning curve with students. So as a teacher,
right.
you present an image and investigate it, and we provide some specific facts about those images. This is one of my favorite images, actually.
Absolutely, mine too.
It was American Samoa, which was one of the first images that I took of coral bleaching, but decided to take a half so people could get the context.
Incredible. And that's just a year apart. Truly stunning to think the stresses these systems are having to deal with are just extraordinary.
Yes, I mean, I fell in love with sort of corals and coral reefs during this journey with Google Underwater Street View, and getting sucked into sort of coral reef science. When you think of corals, they're almost unlike any other creature on the planet in the fact that they are this foundation species that supports a million other species.
Right.
And they can grow these cities that are bigger than our cities for that million species. And so quite incredible animals, but they were designed to survive without humans. And so they're beautifully adapted for normal fluctuations in temperature and can cope very well with those. And it's good. But we've shifted everything up by, a degree plus, and that's pushed them out of their survival zone. So right. That's the main issue.
There are also some photos you had sent that you said have interesting stories behind them. That here's one. Tell us the backstory.
So this is one of the first 360s we ever took, and I was actually sort of very interested in wide-angle photography. You don't really get a wide-angle image underwater that normally can communicate the scale of underwater, and so you get this almost pigeonhole image of the ocean, and it's very difficult to understand the reality of the ocean. So with 360 photography, we were able to create these landscape images, and this one was the image that Google linked to, when we launched the project in 2012. Mm-hmm. So has had hundreds of millions of people go sort of virtual diving on it.
That's so great.
It was just on Heron Island, one of my favorite locations for snorkeling, and just a whole bunch of turtles there. Wow. And the next image, if you wanted to show that one.
Yeah, hold on one second. I have to get back there. Yeah.
This one was one I was particularly sort of proud of, because it was while we were filming Chasing Coral, and I'd heard about coral fluorescing, which is when corals get really stressed and they produce this chemical sunscreen that makes them glow in these incredible colors. And the yellows here were actually emitting light. It's very difficult to show just how bright they were. Yeah. But we were operating off this boat, which was a sort of a dance party boat for French tourists. And we were underwater with kind of booming music underwater, filming one of the most spectacular sights in nature, which is a tragic event of that reef going through a very, very severe bleaching event. But everyone on the boat about 10 meters away was completely oblivious to it.
Yeah, there you go. That gets to something that I wrote about whenever, it was actually in 2022. I did this piece about the importance of, it was when one of the big ocean conferences. And I was musing on it in the context of having been to some island nations in the tropics where it's clear, and people say that very few people have actually gone underwater or stuck their heads underwater. And I did a piece that basically said the UN also has World Drowning Prevention Day, and they have World Ocean Day.
Yeah.
But in a way, they feel that similar. If we get more people swimming safely, obviously, and ideally with a mask, that can also propel conservation in different ways than we might think as well. So how much of what you're doing and thinking can translate into kids in countries with coral resources, or states in the states, or places where you can really boost that kind of human ocean relationship?
We have done quite a lot of very, very remote expeditions. And I think that's where I get almost the most joy, is going into these communities and sharing the imagery. So with virtual reality now, even with sort of the Google Cardboards, you can show imagery that you took in the morning and take villages on virtual dives to see their own reefs. And it's funny, once you engage the kids, the fishermen and the sort of village chiefs want to come over and get into the conversation and want to see the imagery themselves. And suddenly it's just a great communication tool for being able to discuss some of the issues going on, and some of the sort of the challenges they're facing. So, we've had such success going off into these remote communities and engaging communities. But the challenge is scalability.
Right.
And you can only do that in a certain number of locations. So we're now looking at other ways of being able to allow people access to the ocean just on sort of any device, so that we can sort of do that more easily.
That's great. That's great. Yeah, yeah. And phones are so ubiquitous now, and more than a few are water resistant, if not waterproof. So
Exactly. Yeah. But I think you do need to get in the ocean. That's the tough part.
right.
We have such a view of the ocean that it is like our world, and you need to really experience it to really start to understand it. But even if you do get into the sort of shallow ocean, it doesn't really give you a true picture of the full ocean. And that's sort of some of the work that we're now working on, is how do we communicate about the ocean that is the deep ocean, which is 95% of the ocean. How do you communicate the importance of that to people who don't even maybe get to the beach even?
Yeah, that is a tough challenge. What does that feel like, or what's the thinking there?
Well, it's I think you need to, I mean, it was interesting, a couple of weeks ago, we were doing lessons with a Perkins Blind School in Massachusetts, where it was trying to communicate the ocean to people who can't see the ocean. And
Right.
actually, they find it easier to understand the ocean, because you so often see visuals that give you a false impression of the ocean, whether it's visuals of the shallow ocean or whether
Yeah.
it's visuals of the bottom of the ocean. You cannot actually appreciate the reality from an image. Usually, when it comes to the ocean, it's such an alien environment. You can't see the pressure, you can't see the currents, you can't see 99% of the life. And so you get the wrong impression about the ocean and its importance. And so thinking about how you can communicate the ocean in ways that aren't visual, I think, is arguably one of the big secrets to being able to communicate the importance of the ocean. And certainly that's something we're looking to do, is provide people with even a little square cube of ocean that is at average ocean temperature, which is 3.5 degrees centigrade,
Mm-hmm.
explaining that this, even if it's just a liter, contains about 1 billion microbes, and they're all having an impact on the climate. And they're so important, and we're not really thinking too much about them.
Yeah, not to mention the level of biodiversity and in seawater. I think there's this environmental DNA has shown,
Yes.
in samples of water, you have extraordinary diversity of life, even not just the organisms that are in that water, but represented in the water by the DNA that's there.
I know we've been working with Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution with their Mesabot robot, which goes down to about 1,000 meters and sort of really was designed to explore this twilight zone. And I think most people would be surprised to hear that that's where something like 70% of the animals on the planet live.
Right.
And these are the most common animals that live on Earth, and yet they're animals that people haven't even heard of. So it's just quite shocking, our kind of lack of awareness about the ocean.
Well, the more the better. And you, obviously the best way for people to learn more is to go to theoceanagency.org. And you're still seeking support for these projects too. So assume that some of that's big donors and some of that's potentially the average person.
Yes, absolutely. Certainly, it is always a challenge fundraising in sort of ocean conservation, and especially ocean conservation communication. But what we try to do is come up with these scalable ideas that really will make a difference, and especially as we work towards the UN Ocean Conference next year, where I think it will be sort of a pivotal moment for the oceans. We're looking really to ramp up our efforts.
That's great. And what does success look like? I think you've kind of articulated that a little bit, but it feels to me like part of it is having it be more fully participatory. Part of it is, as you were saying, integrating sort of awareness and appreciation for scale beyond the shore. What else is what else would make you 10 or 20 years from now feel like you could relax a tiny bit?
Yes. Well, I think the learning I've had is ocean communication is far more difficult than you ever could think possible, because we have this lack of understanding about its importance, and it's a belief. So it's not something that is easy to communicate, because it gets ignored and it gets forgotten very easily, because people just generally subconsciously think it's not that important. And so we need to change a belief system about the ocean and its importance, and that's not easy. So we need to really reinvent how we talk about the ocean to engage people. So people prioritize ocean science, especially. We spend, for every dollar we spend on ocean exploration, we spend 150 looking for life in space. And I think that needs to be more comparable in terms of the spend, because there are so many solutions to humanity's problems underwater, and we're just not investing in the science to find them yet. So I would love to see people's attitudes towards ocean and ocean science change, so that the ocean science gets supported in the way that we should be supporting ocean science.
And by the way, what you passingly mentioned, historically, the lack of support philanthropically and otherwise for communication, just that I've seen that over and over again. And even the sciences, the social and behavioral sciences around communication. I did a show where Benjamin Sovacool and Indra Overland had done a paper on looking at climate solutions funding for science related to that. And a tiny, 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 tiny portion of it is social and behavioral science.
Yes, which is kind of staggering when you think businesses know that you invest in marketing to achieve success. Right. And yet we don't seem to take that same thinking and apply it to conservation work and science. We don't invest in the marketing to make it a success, which ultimately reduces costs, because people want to get involved and people want to support. So it's just for me, it is the most cost-effective way of achieving results is through communication if it's done well. But it's not something that's traditionally supported.
No, and also you kind of touched on this, the science of what works and doesn't work. When I was at National Geographic Society for a year, and they were at one point, 2017 or so, giving out grants for social and behavioral sciences around imagery impact. The classic example is which spurs more true engagement by someone, a picture of a dead lion or a beautiful resplendent lion, on a rock with its mane, blowing in the wind. And the answer is no one really knows. And this is in an information environment where we're flooded with imagery. So it feels like that would be step one, right?
Oh, I know. And it is kind of staggering that we don't have the skills at this stage, or sort of the understanding at this stage to just apply it. And so that's really what we're trying to do, is find these collaborations to get to some of these answers so that we can get to solutions much, much faster.
Well, that's great. And I'm really glad you're doing what you're doing, because the more, the better. So we'll leave it there. This lives on for folks to share when we're done. We could do another session going forward, maybe with a teacher or educator, about how to use some of the learning tools, or focus on how this integrates with direct experience. There's lots of things to do going forward, and that's what Sustain What is all about. No single conversation solves a problem, but sustained engagement and broadening the dimensions of the conversation can actually drive change. So thanks, Richard from the Ocean Agency, for being part of the show today, and let's stay in touch.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. And I really appreciate your work.
Vice versa. Hold on a second.